Now, it's time for the Anchormen Podcast with Matt Gaetz and Dan Ball.
Welcome back to the Anchormen Show. I'm Matt Gaetz, and we want to thank you for your incredible listenership and viewership. Hundreds of thousands of audio listens on our platforms, millions of views on social media, on One America News, and throughout. And you want so much Anchormen, we're doubling it up for you. So the bad news is the fact that you're hearing from me now on this set does not mean it's Friday. You did not skip forward a day. It is indeed Thursday. But I'm going to be hosting a version of this show that you'll see on Thursdays. And then tomorrow, if you have not had enough Anchormen, my buddy Dan Ball will be here with some of our friends. And the reason we're doing this is because the number one feedback we got was people wanted more than one episode a week. And we wanted the chance to platform some more of the terrific talent that we have here at One America News and a lot of our friends that chat about the news of the day with us. And I got a few of my buddies here with me tonight. The producer, booker, OG guru of the Matt Gaetz Show, Vish Burra. He was the founding producer of Bannon's War Room, worked on my congressional staff, worked on George Santos's congressional staff, and good to have you here at OAN. And also our outstanding investigative reporter, Pearson Sharp, the host of the Sharp Report that you catch on One America News. He's been putting out some incredible original reporting. And tonight what we're going to do is a little different. We're going to take a trip around the world. At the end of this episode, you're going to have a little bit of context and perspective and analysis from the major flashpoint areas. And as Pearson and I were talking about this earlier today, whether you look at the global South, Asia, the Middle East, what's happening in North America, reinvigorated, is there a common theme to what we see going on throughout the world? And we'll tease that out. And then guess what? When you've got the next discussion about global affairs, you're going to be the smartest person there. So I kind of wanted to start with our pacing challenge, which is in Asia. It's China. Pearson, you've spent time living in China. You shared on an earlier episode of Anchorman that people should check out some of your experiences being approached by the Chinese embassy to talk about your reporting. And you gave perspective culturally on the place. But as you look geopolitically, their goals, their ambitions, what we've seen in DeepSeek seems to be a complete game changer regarding their investment model. It used to be that China never really had to innovate because they just stole stuff. And if we weren't enforcing their stealing of stuff, they didn't have to have an innovation economy. Now you are seeing innovations like the number one social media app in the world, TikTok, or like possibly the strongest AI engine developed, DeepSeek, coming out of China. How do you analyze that as someone who's been there and seen it up close?
It is interesting to watch it happen. Obviously, these technologies are piggybacking off of what we've done before. They're iterations of what came before, and arguably they've been more successful, at least TikTok. DeepSeek, I'm not sure. It seems vulnerable and compromised. I mean, we obviously know it's a tool of the CCP. So how that could exactly compete with Grok or ChatGPT on an even playing field, you're not going to get the same answers. You're not going to get the same information. As far as industrial uses or things like that, I don't know. I don't know the capabilities. But are we really stopping them from getting our technology? I mean, how many Eric Swalwells are out there that we don't know about? How many Chinese infiltrating our universities? How many people are just happy to take a buck and say, yeah, this is the project I've been working on for the DoD. You can peek at it. I don't know. Can we contain those leaks? I'm very pessimistic about that.
So what do you do in a world in which you can't? If you assume that there's so much openness, we saw Kash Patel's FBI round up these folks who were in the army and doing precisely what you were saying, sharing information with the Chinese. Do we have to build a resilience that isn't dependent upon stopping that, but rather containing it in some way?
I think we can contain it, at least much better than we have. And I think your points that you brought up are very salient. The issue is, how extreme do we want to go? And my concern here, as with almost everything in our government, is that the politicians, and I'm sure you're aware of this, are held hostage by public opinion. And a lot of times you'll want to do something more extreme than you're allowed to do. But also, I think we have a lot of weak leaders right now that are afraid to take the steps that they need to, like Mitch McConnell's, people like that.
Mitch McConnell, who in every government funding bill was lobbying for more of the visas that rich Chinese could buy to get into the United States. That was you always knew Mitch's apparatus was behind getting more of that type of influence into the United States. But before I get Vish's take on this, having lived in China, do you have a perspective on like the ambitions of the Chinese people, and do you think those match what you report on and see and interact with their government?
Yes. And I want to backtrack 1 second. I think that we need to to contain this, I think we need to be a lot more extreme than we have been. And I think we need to successfully take care of it, do things that are not popular in public opinion. But, I'm kind of a guillotine, solution kind of guy. We got to go extreme. We got to behead the monster, and who cares what the public thinks about it? If you really want a solution, that's what it takes.
Well, I know you're speaking metaphorically because you're not talking about actually beheading people, but
right. No, it's a legal, and I think I read someone in the Trump administration was actually talking about not allowing Chinese nationals into our institutions, into our universities and stuff, into these top secret programs, which is a good start. But anyway, to answer your second question, when I lived there, I was astonished at the lack of personal initiative, at creativity, at just innovation. Everybody there was, and this is cultural. This is driven by the Communist Party. That's what communism does. It destroys creativity. No one there can have an independent thought. Everything is groupthink. It's a hive mind. They can't come up with anything on their own. I was a teacher at a university, and I would give them class projects, and they didn't know where to begin. They didn't know what to do. They couldn't handle it. They would have to eventually like copy off of each other or cheat, or even down to like something super simple. They cheat at everything that they were involved in. They cheated, and I went outside one time and I had them play, we're just goofing around. I taught them Red Rover. They were cheating at Red Rover.
I don't even know how you cheat at Red Rover.
Yeah, they would just lie about who ran first and who got through and da-da-da-da-da. It's like, dude, like, what are you doing? This is ridiculous. But that's like an example of the level of mindset that they have. And I think that scales upwards. And if they can't steal from us, they're going to be in big trouble.
So you're not buying China as a future innovation center. You think it goes back to a steal what they can, manufacture cheap, dump, and destroy industry.
Until they can convert to capitalism, America is the only country in the world that's really innovating. We're the only innovators in the world.
I don't know.
Communism crushes that.
I think that China is embracing a blend of that. And I don't count them out that much on innovation. Vish, as you look at Asia, and we're talking about innovation and manufacturing, like what I remember from being a kid is how much stuff in my house used to say made in Japan on it. We've seen Japan disappear as a power center in Asia. They're largely a ceremonial ally, and their industrial base has been vanquished. Their population is aging. What do we do in an Asia where Japan isn't a hegemonic balance against China as we've seen previously?
Well, I think first of all, we need to go back to strengthening our relationship with Japan on these terms, whether it's innovation or manufacturing, like you said. One of my favorite scenes from Back to the Future was when they go, I think, and see something was made in Japan. The professor sees it, and they said, "Oh, it doesn't. I don't think that this would work." And he says something to the effect of course it's made in Japan. They make all the best stuff." Or Marty McFly says that. So that was the reputation that it had, especially even culturally, right, for 40, 50 years in America, and that fell off. But I don't think that Japan is not still do. I think they're still innovating, but for their own people. And I think that it's now more expensive or not like cost efficient for them to work with the world anymore in terms of exporting that stuff because there's so many cheap Chinese products on the market that are comparable. There's so many cheap, made in India, made in Bangladesh products that are comparable. So I think that that's one of the things that has decreased, Japan's sort of partnership in this manufacturing innovation space with the rest of the world is the rest of the world's increase in doing business with China and India and these places. And so I think that there's certainly I would like to see some kind of innovation sharing with, well, not necessarily sharing, but like coming together and collaboration with Japan. And to kind of add to the top of that, I don't mind doing that with Japan because Japan, I feel, is a very honor-built society. Their whole sort of ethos,
samurai society.
Yeah, it's built on that ethos.
So when you were talking, I was thinking though, the difference between Japan and China though is that other countries, America, Germany, other countries are going into China and having things that they design built there. Mm-hmm. China's not designing these things.
That's right.
With Japan, Japan was designing them. They were Japanese in-house built. I'm not sure I understand how that changed or like what happened, why that fell off, but I think that's an important distinction.
I had a former staff member who said that in Japan, like social media so evaporated the cultural features of society that we turned a nation of samurai warriors into a society of Hello Kitty freaks.
Well, I kind of believe that. I kind of believe that. And, I think that obviously they have really crushing sort of parameters on their economy and their budgets and their deficits. They basically have been running at deficits for like
they've become
decades.
A welfare state.
Yeah, for decades now. And so I think that also hampers what they're able to do. The same way we're seeing family formation and stuff in America be sort of pushed down upon with downward pressures on deficits and all this stuff, right? And so that I think that there is a correlation to that as well.
Do you think ultimately that the check on China becomes India?
No, I don't think so. I think that there has to be I think it has to be everything, right? Like, so my understanding, Edward Loback is a great like geopolitical strategist type who I've listened to on this. And one thing he points out is that China, the thing that it has, that has maintained throughout its thousands of years of history as civilization is that it's really, really bad with its neighbors, right? It just doesn't know how to get along with its neighbors. And so if you encircle China by having good relationships with everybody around it, that can possibly keep China in check.
They're not good at conquering other people.
Right, they're not, but that's not how they
that
don't
was
conquer
Obama's argument.
Yeah.
That's why Obama tried to execute these free trade agreements throughout South Asia, with Vietnam, with Cambodia, with Laos, and it was the thing that united Republicans and Democrats. Everyone from Paul Ryan to Nancy Pelosi
and
was against that. what you just described.
Right, but who blew the big hole on that? Who was the head of the pivot to Asia at that time? It was the Bidens, right? And so the Bidens come in and say, I know Obama's saying all this stuff about that, but we got you. Don't worry. We're going to make sure that this relationship flourishes and that we'll be the valet to this aspect.
Well, let me throw out a hypothesis then, and you guys can attack it or agree with it. What Vish described happening to Japan, getting resorbed into the Chinese economy in a lot of ways and having to react to the changing Chinese economy has essentially happened to every country in the region. There's no powerful nationalistic force. There's no real kinetic deterrent to China in the South China Sea or in the Straits of Taiwan that China really is the driving force, and they've already taken Asia. They've already taken Asia, and now they're on to Africa and beyond. Agree or disagree with the premise, Pearson?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Vish?
I agree with that, but I don't think that that's as much bad news as we think.
I don't think it's the end of the story.
Yeah, I don't. Right.
Okay.
I go ahead. You want?
No.
Yeah. So I think that yes, this is happening. China has, essentially kind of conquered Asia and moved on to Africa, but I think that there is more awareness now about the China problem, let's say, than there was just 8 to 10 years ago, especially post-COVID. I mean, when you consider I think we still don't understand the ramifications of COVID and how it's pretty much traumatized the entire world. And when people consider how this thing started, the answer goes back to China. And I think that people still feel like China hasn't really paid its price for what it's done through COVID. And so I think that is
But
always
it
going
doesn't have
to.
to. When you're the banker for 37% of the world's
Who's going to
economy.
make them?
Well, that's why the United States is so important. That's why Donald Trump coming in is so important. Joe Biden sitting there in the waking moments of COVID at that time, and his bumbling administration and the Democrats there. I think that they certainly didn't do enough. We know the cozy relationship with Biden's and China, and that's why nothing was done when it should have been. That was the prime time to do it. But now I think for a long-term solution and understanding and mindset and ethos, with Donald Trump coming in, the new cabinet coming in as well. Marco Rubio is not really someone who's friendly with China in that regard.
No, he's a China hawk. I mean, he came out of the intel community.
Right.
How do you think it's not the end of the story, Pearson?
Well, it's not necessarily a good thing. I think China views, like you said, they have a very long history. And I think they view this in terms of the long game. And globally, elements of the deep state are all over the place. And we have radical communist underpinnings in a lot of Western governments, a lot of the traditional opposition to China that would have kept China in check. And I think even though Trump is in office right now, China probably views this as a temporary setback and that they can, ride out the next couple of years and Trump will be gone and they'll have someone else they can control, another Biden.
Yeah, and they made tremendous gains during the Biden time, not only in our country, like you mentioned, with the compromise of our politicians, the compromise of our industries, the compromise of our ports, the compromise of our defense supply chain, the compromise of our medical supply chain.
We're the world's pantry.
All
Everyone's
of these
rating
things.
us.
Well, that's why we got to be medically resilient. RFK Jr. has called it out. Big Pharma and the government work together to suppress treatments like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. Why? Because if they admitted those treatments worked, they couldn't rush through the COVID vaccine. Let's be honest, Big Pharma wasn't about to let effective alternatives cut into their billion-dollar payday. They didn't just push the vaccine, they made sure you had no other options. Big Pharma wanted to be in charge of your health, not you. They wanted total control, and they used the government to get it. That's why I trust All Family Pharmacy. They provide ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, antibiotics, vitamins, so much more. The very medications that others try to keep out of your hands. You can get them without red tape, without corporate pressure, just real options. And it's not just emergency meds. You can even get your everyday maintenance medications as well. Just go to allfamilypharmacy.com/Matt. Use code MATT10 for 10% off. Don't wait. Be prepared. Take back control of your healthcare. So one of the places where I think geopolitical strategy is playing out in real politics is in Africa. And what happens in Africa is China shows up with suitcases full of American cash, US dollars, and they bribe people. And Russia shows up with a whole lot of muscle that can keep you in power in exchange for access to mining. And the United States shows up training your military. That's our big thing. We can train your military. We can get your military more capable. Well, if you look at a lot of the places in Africa that have endured military coups, we have trained the coup leaders in Guyana, in Burkina Faso, in Mali, in Niger. It is in the Ivory Coast. You get the military junta, and if you don't have to pull the thread on the sweater very far before there's U.S. involvement in training those very people. Now, I've pointed that out extensively, and some people say, well, that's the way it should be, Matt. That's the way it should be. Because if we can't show up and bribe people, and we're not going to show up and like ethnically cleanse the minorities in your country that you don't like, then maybe the coup thing is our game. I don't know. What do you think?
Why can't we show up and bribe people?
Well, should we? Is that is your vision for 2025 American colonialism that we show up with our own cash and just try to outbribe the Chinese?
Well, I think I'm of very different minds on this issue. One, in my heart, I'm an isolationist. I don't think we should be involved anywhere at all. But in the real world, I mean, we obviously are. There's these problems that we need to fix, and we created a lot of them. So in Africa, I think we have an opportunity to fight back against China. Whatever they can do, we can do 100 times better. And I think rather than setting up these military juntas and stuff and training these people, I think we could come in with a lot of cash and a lot of incentives. And instead of taking the Chinese approach, where you offer the country something, and then once they accept it, they're in your debt forever because they can never pay it back, and you basically enslave them. Instead of a Belt and Road Initiative, we'll have a Liberty Initiative. And we come in there and we help them get established economically. We do what America does on paper in the movies. We be the good guys, and we help them get ahead. And I think that could do a lot for us. Going back to there's a great opportunity too. Going back to our earlier conversation today, the Democratic Republic of Congo is really in bed with China right now, and they're helping them out with a lot of rare earth minerals like we talked about. U.S. needs those. At the same time, Congo right now is asking the U.S. for help with this military situation they have with these rebels. They're asking for help. That is a perfect opportunity to go in there, get some rare earth minerals, get rid of the rebels, and
but then what? We're tied down, and the isolationist on the couch just told me that we need to get tied down in some in some Congolese civil war.
I would love to pull back out of everywhere. I'd love to get U.S. troops.
I am an isolationist, and let's go fight.
But I'm a realist too, and we're already over in these conflicts. China is doing things that directly affect us. They are taking actions against our national interests. And so we can be isolationist and pretend that's not happening, or we can fight back in what I think is the most realistic way. You know, in my other heart of hearts, I say bomb everybody and let God figure it out. But, you know,
that also is a metaphor for anyone who's a YouTube monitor listening to that discussion. So Vish, is Pearson right? Should we just bribe people? And by the way, one could make the argument that President Trump is ready to play bare knuckles tactics here. President Trump has functionally ceased enforcement of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. And I think that's because he saw the ways in which Chinese companies were beating out American companies, because under some really intense application of that law, you go upgrade someone's flight to Turkey like Eric Adams, and if it's a foreign leader, you could find yourself on the other end of a really aggressive Department of Justice, whereas Trump says maybe a little more wheeling and dealing. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that for as long as I've at least paid attention to American foreign policy, like, we don't do this kind of like global statecraft very well, right? Like, just think, like, we instead
who
of
does it the best?
The best in history has been the British Empire, right? In how they handle these local populations and play different ethnic conflicts between each other.
Coming from an Indian,
well, we know it the best, but well, I mean, but that's because they were studied. They understood the different conflicts between tribes and ethnicities and played them off each other to get what they wanted for their empire at the end of the day. They understood the objective and did whatever it took for their people. We don't do enough of that. Instead, we're going there and saying, we're just going to America everything that, we come into contact with.
Let's really know what that means.
But we don't even know what that means, and we're not even giving them what they want. And so, that's really, like, who is going to be moved?
You don't like gay options?
operas?
No,
I don't
no.
think Uganda does.
And how much are like just how much are we willing to spend on building schools for girls in Afghanistan? And then the first thing that these people did as soon as we pulled out, they went and destroyed those schools, right? And so like that's not what they want.
Hold on right there, because I think that is a frailty in what Pearson laid out, which is like, well, we can give these people a path to Western markets, to more economic growth. And what we're seeing is, one, they don't necessarily believe us because so much of our foreign policy has pivoted to exporting wokeness. And then subsequently, to your point, it's not really what they want when the other person has a suitcase full of cash. Because you know what? You can think you have that long-term right to that African cobalt mine, but the next time, if it's China's people who train the coup leaders instead of the Americans, and they're the ones in charge, they're going to throw you out anyway, which, by the way, is pretty close to what happened in Niger, where the Russians were backing a particular group that took over. They threw out the Americans. We had a 9-figure military base that we built in Niger, and then we got thrown out by the scruff of our neck because other people played the game tougher.
That's right. And so we and another thing is like, well, there's all these radicals, in these countries that we need to get control of or show them a better way. And so what we're going to do, we're going to take these people and we're going to transition them into desk jobs and 9-to-5s at McDonald's, right? And then they're
going to work at a Jamba Juice.
Right. And they think that this is going to solve the fire of what those people wanted in the first place. No, it's just a complete misunderstanding of the region, of the people, of everything. And we consider, who are we even sending in to do this sort of statecraft on our behalf? And it's like the Alyssa Slotkins of the world, right? And like these sort of CIA soccer moms, as I call them, and even the lady who got the CIA station blown up in Afghanistan, right? She didn't know who she was talking to. She ended up being played by an Al-Qaeda operative, right? And who ended up using her to blow out the rest of his enemies, and then blew them out too. So like that, we're just not we're not doing the homework in terms of
we though, Pearson? Do you think we can? Do you think that if we were sufficiently capable that we could play this type of global chess? Because while I'm not an isolationist, I try to be a realist, and the notion that we're going to be able to do that at this stage of the game in Africa just seems very low to me.
What was the question there?
No, the question is, do you think that we can get enough statecraft to be able to successfully move the pieces into place so that around the world we have friendly governments to work with?
I think Vish is right. I don't think we know how to do that. I think if you had the right people in there, I think Trump has an instinct for that, but he's surrounded by too many people who have other ambitions. We have this...
Well, hold on. Let's talk about some of those people. We've had, as one of the big news stories this week, this Signal chat, and we've chatted about it on our show, and it is all the talk of Washington. To me, it seems mostly much ado about nothing. This was a successful operation. People were communicating about it. But what's your take? Is this story overblown, or do you think appropriate attention and concern given?
Well, I think in this situation, it doesn't seem like there was any negative consequences that came out of it that we know of, but it definitely exposes a vulnerability. And I think it's a valid concern that people are just chit-chatting on non-government, officially secured channels about this kind of thing. I mean, isn't that sort of what Hillary was in trouble for? That she was using these emails on
but she wasn't using an encrypted app that was provided to the CIA, which is what Signal is. She was just using her own email server to avoid
It's still concerning. And what we discussed earlier, what Waltz did is especially concerning.
Why does what Waltz did especially concern you?
Well, he doesn't seem to be the most Trumpian of people. And I think he probably has agendas that run counter to maybe what some of the things that Trump wants to do. And the fact that he brought this guy on, he probably had his name changed in there for a reason, and I don't think it was a good reason. So I don't trust him, and I think that he should be fired for this.
Vishbara, the story we get from Waltz, and I don't have a reason not to believe him, though Pearson, makes a logical point, is that he had Jeffrey Goldberg's name in his phone under a different description, not Jeffrey Goldberg, but something else. Have you ever in your phone ever had someone else's number than the name that was reflected? Has that ever been something you've done?
Yes, but it's for completely different reasons.
But well, is it? Yeah. Because what were the reasons you ever had someone's number in your phone, but not their actual name?
What were the reasons?
Well, usually because I didn't want somebody in my closer nexus finding out who I'm talking to.
His closer nexus.
If it were to ever get out, that I'm texting with X person or I'm speaking with X person, I didn't want people to know, especially people very close to me, if they ever got their hands on my phone or my messages, that I was speaking to that person. And so that's why I would change their name, right? It would come up as, the local pizza joint or something like that, or just something very vague.
Texting a lot with Papa
So hold on, but I want to test the point Pearson just made. Do you think that was what was happening with Michael Waltz?
I think it's possible. I think it's certainly possible that he didn't want. I mean, first of all, if you really think about that, as a Republican, knowing that you're, or in being in comms with the editor-in-chief of the Atlantic, right, in any way, whether that's under a fake name or a real name, right, that's very questionable to start, right?
Devil's advocate, I assume that's fairly common. These people are in touch with a lot of the media. Is that not correct?
I think that it could be, it's common, but with the editor-in-chief of the Atlantic, that's really, especially for Mike Waltz just became the national security advisor. I think before that he was, I think, a member of the foreign affairs committee on the House or something like that. So I mean, maybe they maintain contact, but even still, then that raises questions like, well, what were you talking about with him before when you were on the House, Foreign Affairs Committee or the Intel Committee, whatever it was, especially the Atlantic. The Atlantic is the premier outlet to discuss all Atlanticist issues, right? And the Atlanticist relationship is actually one of the big sort of flashpoints of this entire administration, especially in the last couple of months with the Munich Security Conference speech by J.D. Vance, with what we're talking about with NATO and having and putting pressure on these European countries to fund their own defense. Yeah, what were you talking about with him, Michael Waltz? If it wasn't now, then what were you talking about with him then? Right? I think that's a good question to ask. Why did you need to be in comms with Jeffrey Goldberg? The suckers and losers guy is the one you were talking to, right? Did you excoriate him for that? If you said yes, I had his number just to tell him how nasty that piece was, then you know what, I might take it. But that's not what he's saying either. What he's saying, I don't know how he got in there. Oh, he was inadvertently in a different name. Goldberg then says, actually, I did meet him once, right? And so somebody's got to say, somebody's not giving the whole truth here, in my opinion.
Yeah, I give Waltz the benefit of the doubt, but I just know how Washington works, and there's only so many times you get that benefit of the doubt before people start to be pretty critical. Let's continue to kind of roll into the Middle East right now, and the ceasefire that Israel and Hamas has now totally fallen apart. Bibi seems to me in Israel like he's constantly curating this balance with the hardliners on the right and then the populists who seem to really favor the ceasefire dynamics that create the hostage exchanges. And I believe this about the Middle East. There's probably not going to be any real sustainable peace in that region until you have some resolution to what is going on with, Judea and Samaria, with what's happening in Gaza, with Lebanon and northern Israel. That if that remains a flashpoint you're going to have cascading problems, and you've got a place that Iran can always go poke. You've got places where Turkey can go poke. You've got a justification for Israel to wipe out Iranian proxies in southern Syria and potentially even to engage in further strikes deeper into Iran. And here's my call. These Gulf monarchies like Saudi Arabia, if they want to be hegemons, step up to the plate. Be a hegemon.
Right.
Like, step up to the plate and say, we're Saudi Arabia. We're here to fix this problem in Gaza, get Hamas out of the way, get the violence out, and to create some economic stability. Qatar is a country that wants to level up diplomatically. We have seen them do that alongside Saudi Arabia. I think Qatar can be a greater force for good in Gaza in terms of policing the worst elements that create threats. How do you think we fix the Middle East, Pearson?
Well, to your point just a second ago, why would Saudi Arabia or Qatar step up? I mean, they're having their cake and eating it too.
They want to be big boys in global diplomacy. You see that with the way Saudi is hosting Russia, Ukraine. Like, you want to host Russia, Ukraine? How about you help in your own neighborhood resolve the flashpoints that could lead us to global war?
I don't think they see that as an issue. They're making tons of money. We're paying them tons of money. They're getting it all over the world. They have these Islamic caliphate centers all over Europe. They're spreading their influence without having to fight a war. Like I said, they're getting their cake and eating it too.
Yeah, but shouldn't Western financial systems demand more of them as a driver of peace in their own region before just completely opening up?
Well, that's a different question. Absolutely. I completely agree with that. I don't think we should be doing business with them. Like, period.
Well, the problem with that is, you stop doing business with them, they go double down on BRICS. The Saudis sell all their oil outside the dollar. Now the dollar starts to crash at a time when Congress won't cut spending, and you've got massive entitlement programs that are going to bankrupt the country. That is a real consequence of us actually muscling up on Saudi Arabia, which is probably why we never have in Republican or Democratic administration.
We have some of the biggest oil reserves in the entire world. We have more oil than the Middle East does. We could be the world's exporter.
It's not about whether or not we need their oil today. It might have been that way in the 80s, 90s. What it's about now is, do they sell their oil in dollars, or do they sell it in some other system, Vish?
Yeah, well, our system is so tied to the oil for dollar system right now that is the primary concern, is if Saudi Arabia continues to do that. Obviously, we know.
But do you think they should have to do more regionally?
100% they have to do more, but
and Pearson says they don't care. They don't have to care.
They don't. Well, here's the thing, right? So it's either you're hoping that the U.S. remains the hegemon for as long as possible, globally, where we'll come in and we'll look out for you to a certain extent because you're selling your oil in dollars for us, and we'll do our best to police this region. But that's coming up to a tension point too, obviously, with the isolationists on the rise, Trump and his America first, out of the forever wars kind of situation and policy. Let's say we do end up in like a multipolar world, right, where different countries are going to be responsible for different parts of the world. Who's going to be the pole in the Middle East? Is it
Iran?
Now, by the way, if it's Iran, how do you think the Saudis are going to react to that, right? And then we're going to turn around to them and say, well, they stepped up to the plate and they're willing to do big boy diplomacy. Whether we like it or not, they're willing to police their region, right? And so Saudi Arabia, if you're not stepping up to the plate, we're just going to give this part of the world to Iran, right? Or Israel, if Israel can even maintain policing that region without, American help, can they even do that? And if not, then we're going to have to look at Israel and be like, yeah, we're going to let Iran, police this part of the neighborhood. How does that make you feel, right? And Israel's definitely not going to be happy with that.
Well, and Israel can't be the policeman of the Middle East, can they, Pearson?
No, and not with our help. Like, everything they have, we give to them as far as military.
Well, no, but even if, I mean, it's not like we could convert Israel into our proxy fighter there, because they would unite the Arab world against them.
Right. And that's happened before.
Yeah, we don't want to relive the Crusades.
Really?
Well, I mean, not all of them turned out so great.
Well, not all of them did. The first one was pretty good, though. I think,
sometimes you get judged by the sequels.
I think it might be time for another crusade. Let's go back and retake the Middle East.
I think
Let's make it Christian again.
I think that you really are one interesting isolationist.
Well,
let's
it's
do
one
the
of those things.
crusades.
It's kind of like, I'll give you an example. When I was in, I think, 3rd grade, I was walking around the playground. There's this one bully. He was a lot bigger than me. He was 5th grade. And I'm a kind of guy, just leave me alone. I just want to play my games, leave me alone. And for some reason, he took a disliking to me. And he kept picking on me day after day. And one day, he pushed it too far, and I was walking away from him, and he pushed me. And this is one of those things where you're not even thinking about what you do, and I still can't understand what happened. But I turned around and ducked, and I uppercut him and knocked him on his butt. Probably the coolest thing I've ever done.
It's been downhill since then.
It's been downhill since then. And he left me alone since then, but he also just he suddenly became my buddy and wanted to protect me from everybody. And oh, he's so cool, da, 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 da. So they're pushing us. We have to respond at some point. All these countries have been taking advantage of us for so long. We can't just say, okay, we're going to stop playing. We're going to do our own thing. We have to push back or there's not going to be anything left. And at this point, I don't know if we've passed that point. We might have passed the critical edge where there is no coming back and things are just going to keep unraveling until there's nothing left. I don't know. It's kind of a pessimistic worldview, but things are so bad right now. I don't know how we get back from this.
By the way, I think Pearson is more literate in statecraft than half the State Department and the CIA combined. That is honestly, I think there's something to that though, that we need to. It's not that we're isolationists in the sense that we just want to get our hands off of everything, but we do have a responsibility that if we're going to pull back in any region, that we need to put somebody there who's both strong but is also somebody that we can trust or that we know has some sort of basis or honor, like some sort of honor system where we understand that, hey, look, we just beat you in a fight, and so you understand that we can kick your ass one day if we need to, but for now, we're going to leave you to police this region and we're going to expect you to do it well, right? And this has already gone to the mat before. You don't want to do it again, right? And
so who's that partner in the Middle East, Vish?
I think that in the Middle East,
Saudis the one buying
Saudis
the weapons.
big
The UAE
boy.
just agreed to a $1.4 trillion weapons.
The problem with Arab militaries in general, I think that they have a very bad habit of basically knifing each other in the back amongst their own ranks, and there's a lack of trust amongst their own sort of middle management and sort of general management. And so I think that the Persians have, Iran has more civilizational experience in this area. So it's either Iran or Turkey.
Yeah, well, it's not a pretty picture if Iran's in power in the Middle East. I think the whole thrust of the Trump doctrine in the Middle East is going to be to neuter Iran.
They don't have a lot of friends.
Yeah, well, they don't. But again, they have
their friends fight.
They do, but we do too.
They have the institutional knowledge.
Iran's friends fight. Our friends want to know when their next lend-lease program from the American taxpayer is going to show up.
Right.
Let's get on our side of the Atlantic. In Latin America, actually, before we do Latin America, let's run up to Europe real quick. In Europe, we've seen that dependency state develop. I think Trump and Vance are delivering a message loud and clear that you're not going to be a protectorate of our country anymore. Vance makes the argument on these exposed signal chains that actually these shipping lanes that are being attacked by the Houthis ought to be defended by Europe, and it's a chance for Europe to step up. What's your read on our force posture as it relates to Europe and how they deal with the security dynamics at play?
Oh, they're all socialists, and I don't think we should be helping them.
Europe, you would just go to zero?
Yeah, I mean, they all clearly want to stab us in the back, and they take every opportunity to do so. Who do you think's
our best friend in Europe? It's got to be, the Brits, but I mean, they participated in spying on Trump.
Hungary?
That's a good one.
I mean, Poland? I don't know. These Eastern countries, because none of the Western countries are friendly with us. If we had Marine Le Pen in, we'd be doing great.
She might not even be allowed to run.
Who's the Prime Minister of Italy?
Georgia Meloni.
Yeah, I mean, she's pretty
great.
cool.
Yeah, what do you think, Vish?
So I think that in Europe, what right now, they have a lot of leadership in place that is anti-American, that have come up during a time when America just essentially funded their entire welfare sort of system that they got going on there, and they are in a stasis where they can only rely on that, or they only know a politics where that's the presupposition undergirding the rest of their understanding of the relationship with America, right? As long as America provides us the endless Marshall Plan resources that they've been providing us for almost a century, then we're okay with America. And the moment they move off of that is the moment we're against America. I don't think that Europeans and Europeans in general feel that sentiment towards America. I think that they love America. I think there's a lot of people in Europe who love America, but it's the wrong leadership that's in place. I think that that's why you see a lot of this tamping down of populist leaders rising up in these countries, because those leaders clearly understand that they want to make their nations stronger and want to do it without having to need America to hold their hand through everything. And they want to be on an equal footing with America, or something close to it, where it's a partnership, not a protectorate. And so I think that...
I think you're giving them way too much credit. I'm with Pearson. I'm with Pearson that they would like us to pay for their protection like they're owed it, and then they would like to look down their nose at a lot of the rest of us for not having cradle to grave welfare system.
Well, then we just cut it off, right? And so but that's the thing. That's the thing we're not willing to do. Like, are we America or not? Are we going to actually, when there's these people who are clearly holding their nose up at us because we don't have cradle to grave healthcare, and it's like, well, let's see you pay for the healthcare when we're not providing you security guarantees.
I think that's exactly what's happening, and I think that what you see, I don't know how this war is going to resolve, but I think it is going to resolve. And I do think it's nice that we're talking about how, not if, in the war between Ukraine and Russia. And my sense is that anytime Europe has to put up or shut up, they will relent. And like you say, I wish that wasn't the case, but it is.
By the way, Finland, 75% taxes.
Sounds lovely.
Yeah, so that's cradle to grave for you.
Yeah, no kidding. All right, let's come over here to our side of the Atlantic. And here's my argument in Latin America. There are three models. You either become a vassal state of China, you become a narco state akin to Venezuela and Mexico, or you follow the nationalistic model set by my friend Nayib Bukele, where you impose strong security, where you defeat the criminal element, and you try to invigorate the cultural excellence that dates back to Simón Bolívar. Think it's three tracks you can run on, Vish?
Well, why isn't Argentina in the Javier Milei track?
Oh, the rug pull meme coin track?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to comment on the rug pull meme coin part, but I think there's something to be said about the sort of socialist structures that they have in those countries and how that's stifled growth and innovation in a lot of South America and particularly Argentina. And that reaction is how you get a Javier Milei. And if that can be replicated where there's a liberty-focused approach to governing or politics from the right-leaning perspective there, I think that can offer a viable sort of alternative.
Yeah, I would put Milei and Bolsonaro kind of on the Bukele track of nationalistic, not surrendering to the globalists. What do you think about Latin America, Pearson?
I mean, it's the same situation as in Africa. I think we need a similar Liberty Road initiative where we go down there and we help turn these into capitalistic, right-leaning societies instead of letting the communists run amok down there. And we can do that with sanctions. We can do that with economic enforcement. We can do that with all kinds of things. But I think it needs to happen. And we just need to stop being such wusses with all these different countries, letting them get away with these Marxist communist leaders. And I don't think we should, pull Grenada-style situations and go in and overthrow. But I think we can put the right amount of pressure on these countries and give them an alternative, an attractive alternative to China. And that could start turning things around.
What do you think is our best sales pitch in that regard?
Well, obviously, everybody wants the dollar. Everybody wants money. That's one of the big.
And these are increasingly dollarized economies. It's one place in the world where the dollar is still very much in circulation.
Everybody wants the American dream. Like literally everybody. I think the biggest problem we have right now is that there is a new world order type institution somewhere out there that is pulling strings to try and get more power. The George Soros type people, the Klaus Schwab type people. And America is the primary obstacle in that. And so for decades, since the 50s, maybe even since World War II, people in these institutions have been trying to undermine America and our excellence. And everyone around the world wants to be America. Everybody wants that. Everybody wants to live the American dream and have the big house and, be Arnold Schwarzenegger. That's just, everybody wants that. Come on. And so we have these liberal academics. It's a whole cancer that's just encroached in our society that has undermined the American exceptionalism and the ideal, the image that we had since like the 80s that everybody wanted. And we've got to fix our cultural cancer and our cultural rot. And all these countries want to be like us. There's a great Rammstein song, which I take it the opposite direction. He makes this as a criticism. But we all live in America. And that's the name of the song. And it goes around the world showing all these people drinking Coca-Cola and Wonder Bra and all this other stuff. But it's true. Everybody wants that. And we need to leverage that in these countries and make America great again on the world stage. It's one of our best assets, and we're not using it. We've let it rot.
Yeah, by the way, I would say that we have way more cultural power, or we would be better at statecraft if our thing was like exporting Wrangler jeans.
Seriously,
then
nobody wants to be China.
Right.
Nobody wants that anywhere in the world.
Right.
We would clamoring to be Chinese.
We would be doing way better statecraft if that was the case. If it was like Marvel movies are a better export than like us exporting wokeness or like DEI or any of this stuff. We would do better on that front if that was the case. We were making like, hey, we get you like all this nice stuff that you look towards, and America rules global culture. When Pearson says everyone wants to be American, that's what he's talking about. They want to wear the jeans, they want to listen to the music, they want to go to the McDonald's. Like a high-end date in India is taking your girl to KFC.
In China too.
In China, frankly, in the American South as well.
Well, you know what? Those are our people, all right. And that's the kind of statecraft or understanding of our power with our culture that should be driving our global statecraft.
Well, I think that is indeed the common theme of the episode. And before we get out of here, we just have to get to North America and where you are on Greenland. JD Vance and Usha Vance are glamming up the dog running competition. Pearson, how far should the Trump administration go in their Greenland ambitions?
I think we should try and take it all the way, honestly. There's the famous saying that if you're not growing, you're dying. And I think
it's a famous isolationist saying, I'm sure.
Yes, exactly. I think we need a Teddy Roosevelt policy here. And I don't agree with a lot of what he did, but I think his American exceptionalism was great for growing our country. And if we could take Greenland, I mean, that's great for morale. That you're proud to be American.
All right, Vish. How many American troops should die in our assault on Greenland?
I don't think anyone. I don't think we'll lose any troops.
Yeah, it's not that
doing that. No, but I do believe that we need new homesteads. That's what I think that that's what we're seriously lacking right now. Is that there've been generations of
we could do that in the American West.
Well, you know what? But why don't we? Right? And when is BLM gonna give the
Bureau of Land Management?
Bureau of Land Management, right? But that's about we don't
Equally
do that.
Bad though.
Right? But based. but that's what we don't do that. But Bureau of Land Management's not going to do that anytime soon. So it's Canada. You better open up. Greenland. You better open up because that's where all the next fertile land is going to be if you track a 100-year term and what's going to melt and all that.
If we don't take it.
Vish Burra closing out the show with strong predictions on climate change and where the future farmlands of humankind will be. Make sure you give us a 5-star rating, subscribe turn the notifications on by hitting that little bell. That way, every time there's some Anchorman coming out, you'll get the chance to see it tomorrow. My good buddy Dan Ball is here with another one of our outstanding One America News anchors, Riley Lewis. We hope you tune into that as well. And you can catch the Matt Gaetz Show every weeknight, 9 o'clock Eastern, 6 Pacific on One America News. Make sure you download our app at oann.com. And when you do that, you'll be able to see the Sharp Report, where Pearson is able to bring his terrific investigative reporting to all of you with outstanding analysis and opinion. And Vish, where can folks find you on the internet?
You can find me on X at Vishbura and on Truth Social at Vish.
Thanks everybody for joining us for another episode of Anchor. I'm so excited when we get our Merriweather Farms shipments in. You get a beautiful piece of ribeye. Look at that marbling. Now, I take it out of the package, let it get down to room temperature. All I've got on here is a little salt, a little pepper, and then a little avocado oil. And then I've had my pan preheating with a little oil.
Head to merriweatherfarms.com and enter promo code MattG for